everyone, I'm Marianne Donley from PanicD.com, Dark Shadow Ghost Tours, and Our Haunted Travels. And today I'm here to talk to you about one of the locations in the PanicD database, number 1866, from Walnut Grove, North Carolina. This is going to go into the PanicD archives rather than in Our Haunted Travels because we haven't actually been to this location. And the reason we haven't been is because it isn't there anymore. In fact, it's actually been broken down, demolished throughout the years. It is no longer present. The site that I'm talking about is actually the Lawson Family murder site, and it happened that there were murders of the Lawson family on December 25th, Christmas Day, back in 1929. And the entire family, except for the eldest son, was actually murdered on that day. So, without further ado, the Lawson Family murder site.
In 1929, this gentleman named Charlie Lawson took his family, who was not very rich by any stretch of the imagination, very, very poor. He took his family to town and bought them all new clothes and had a family portrait that got taken. And again, this was really unusual because they just did not have money for these kinds of things, but he said it was going to be for a Christmas surprise. Now, his family consisted of his 37-year-old wife, Fanny, and their children, Arthur, who was 16, Marie, who was 17, Carrie, who was 12, Mabel, who was 7, James, who was 4, Raymond, who was 2, Mary Lou, who was 4 months old. And what happened was they went into town, they got these new clothes, and then they got this family portrait taken. Then came Christmas Day. And it was a very cold and snowy Christmas afternoon. And that day actually began with him and his son, his oldest son, Arthur, going out hunting. And so they were out and they ran out of shotgun shells. So Charlie had his son go into town to get some more shotgun shells. While Arthur was out into town, Charlie went on a killing rampage and he ended up killing his entire family. So he started with the slaughter of his daughters, Carrie and Mabel. And they were actually getting ready to go out to their uncle and aunt's house. He actually waited for them in the tobacco barn, and when they were close enough in range, he shot them with a shotgun. So apparently he wasn't completely out of shotgun shells, he just needed more. But then to ensure that they were actually dead, he bludgeoned them, and then he placed their bodies in the tobacco barn. Then he returned to the house and shot his wife Fanny, who was sitting on the porch. And as soon as the gun was fired, his daughter Marie, who was inside, screamed, and the two smallest boys, James and Raymond, attempted to find a hiding place. But he shot Marie and then found and shot the two boys. He then killed the baby, the 4-month-old baby Mary Lou, and it is believed that she was actually bludgeoned to death. After this massacre, he ended up moving into the woods, and he kind of disappeared into the woods for several hours. Based on all of the murders that happened and all the shots and things, people began to gather at the residence after hearing that tragedy. A few hours later, people who were there, they heard another gunshot coming from the woods, and this is where Mr. Lawson actually took his life. Now, the people who actually got to go and find Charlie was actually his eldest son, Arthur, who had come back from town where he had actually heard about the murders from in town. By the time he had gotten back, his father had shot himself, and so him and a couple of others actually ran to the shot sound and actually found him. But when they did go in and find all the other bodies, the bodies of the family were found with their arms crossed over their chests and rocks underneath their heads. And the only survivor that day was the eldest son, Arthur, who had gone on that errand to get more shotgun shells. So why would Charlie do such a thing? Again, there were several reasons why. One of them was that he wasn't actually the guy who murdered the family at all. It was staged as to make it look like he did, but it was really that he had witnessed an organized crime incident and that had been found out, and then his entire family had been murdered for it. But then that does leave Arthur. Why was Arthur left alone? Another one involved a man that Charlie had started a fight with. that maybe it was him who had done it, but neither of those really worked out so well. One of the biggest reasons why it turned out not to come into play until several years later, when a book was written called White Christmas, Bloody Christmas in 1990. And the theory was that there was an incestuous relationship between him and his eldest daughter, and that she had become pregnant. The family knew it, the mother knew it, he obviously knew it. He ended up taking the lives of the whole family to kind of keep that at wraps, I guess. So that is the most plausible and thought idea as to the reason why he would do such a thing, and on Christmas Day nonetheless. So all of the bodies were buried in their brand new outfits that he had just purchased for them. There was, of course, that picture, which was taken also of the entire family just shortly before Christmas. That is the most famous picture of the Lawson family now. Interesting things that happened after that, though, were that his brother, Charlie's brother, Marion Lawson, actually took care of the home and turned it into a tourist attraction. He opened it up to let people come in and see the murder scene and everything like that, including leaving out the cake that Marie, one daughter, had made on Christmas Day for Christmas. And he left that out on display for the tour. And of course, you know, how everybody wants a piece of everything. A lot of people apparently started taking all of the raisins from the cake that she had made as a little souvenir. So eventually he did stick it into a covered glass cake dish and left it there. And it was apparently preserved there for a number of years. But after the house was closed down from the tours, somehow someone named Myrtle Brown, her family actually obtained possession of the cake. She eventually took it out and just threw it away in the woods. Why she did that, don't know, but she did do that a number of years later. There have also been many songs that have been recorded about this, including one by the Stanley Brothers called The Murder of the Lawson Family in 1956, and it shows up on a CD from 2004 called An Evening Long Ago. When the burials happened, as I said, that they were buried in their clothing that was purchased for them just shortly before, but also it attracted so much attention that 5,000 visitors came for the funeral itself. And they were buried in a single large plot on the Browder family cemetery, which was just outside of Germantown and actually is supposedly right outside of the Catholic cemetery. So they were buried all together, and the baby was supposedly buried in the mother's arms, the little 4-month-old baby. But they think that maybe some of the hauntings that have come to be since the murders actually has something to do with the fact that they were buried outside of hallowed ground. Now, in the cemetery itself, there have been reports of batteries not working. So you put brand new batteries in your camera, you go into the cemetery, and then it just doesn't work. But you leave the cemetery, and then suddenly, voila, the camera works again. There's also a report of mists that appear and blow leaves around. When no wind is blowing, pictures have been captured of a mother holding a baby. The house is actually no longer present. It collapsed back in the 70s, and all of the wood was actually hauled off, and there's really nothing left to see. There's actually supposedly corn and soybeans now growing on that property, so somebody is using that property as a farm. On the ground where the Lawson family home was actually located, there have been reports of seeing children running around and playing and so forth. They say that if you look at pictures of the Lawson family, it's actually the children of the Lawson family that are still playing on the land. But there's also an interesting story about a local bridge. After the house was closed from the tours, the floorboards from the cabin, which would have, of course, contained blood stains and so forth from the murders, supposedly pulled up and used to build a bridge across a creek running through that land. And as soon as the construction of the bridge was completed, there began to be stories of supernatural happenings at that location. And so the bridge is supposedly on Bulljack Road, and you can't drive on it anymore, so there is a walking path that's still available to get there. Supposedly, if you drove your car onto the bridge back in the day, an eerie fog would surround the car and the vehicle would just unexplainably shut off, which has happened on several other haunted bridges as well. But this is one where a condensation would then appear on the windows and small little handprints would begin to cover all the windows and the windshield. And then when they finally get to drive off, a 1930s car seems to chase and follow you closely and erratically drive through the winding roads of the county, and then it'll just disappear. Now, this was a murder that happened in 1929, so why is it a 1930s car? Not so sure, but something has to add to the story. I'm sure there will be more research done in that area. But also, those little handprints supposedly are thought to be the Lawson children. Anyways, that is the ghostly hauntings surrounding the Christmas murders of the entire Lawson family, except for the eldest son, which he survived because he was sent into town. Now, we do know that Charlie, he waited around for a while before he killed himself. Was he waiting for his son to come home to kill him as well? Don't know, but he eventually did kill himself that same very Christmas day. And then his oldest son did survive for several years after that. His son eventually died in a car accident. That's going to end this edition of the Panic D video archives for the Lawson family murders on Christmas Day in 1929. If you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit the like button below. If you'd like to see more episodes like this, go ahead and click the subscribe button so that you're ensured to know when we put out a new video. Please comment below if you have any information about this murder event, or if you have any just comments about how sad the tragedy is on Christmas Day. So for now, thanks for listening.